Listen to Alfred.
A nature reserve here on Park Walk. Feature trees to frame the views from the Jubilee Steps and a more natural children's play park are all ideas proposed for Shaftesbury's southern slopes. Back in November, councillors on Shaftesbury Town Council's Recreation and Open Spaces and Environment Committee discussed a blueprint for determining how some of Shaftesbury's most treasured areas will appear and evolve in years to come. The Southern Slopes Management Plan suggests a longer-term strategy for managing this special landscape.
This is a bigger picture about how we're going to look after this land, rather than just getting on and doing it, having that bigger picture in mind.
That's the author of the proposed plan, Town Clerk Claire Commons. Claire says it's important to set a policy for the green spaces, linking St John's Hill with the edge of Gold Hill, including St James's Park.
First and foremost, this was the area that's most visible to the visitors that come to the town that isn't currently with a management plan, so it seemed the best place to start.
Claire says procedures are already in place for managing Castle Hill.
I'm very pleased that they're doing it and grasping the nettle, because the whole thing has been unmanaged for so long and there's been lots of ad hoc things put together.
That's the chairman of the Open Spaces Group, John Parker.
But this is now going to put the whole lot into a good framework. So I think it's a very good move to have done that. It's not set in stone. It's a living, growing document, and I hope the future discussions will identify a few of the issues which still have to be settled.
It's not the first time policies for this space have been written. Swans Trust once drafted a blueprint, but Claire says the council didn't adopt the proposal. These new proposals divide the slopes into different zones, each with its distinct identity. The rose gardens are excluded for now.
I haven't included the rose garden at the moment because they are nice formal municipal gardens and they serve their purpose very well. I've done a sort of very small litmus test with people that use it and some of the open space group members, and the general feeling was actually it does its job at the moment, so nothing needed for radical change there.
A ribbon of green space stretching from Stony Path past the Jubilee Steps and the Park Walk War Memorial will be a place for nature under these proposals. Claire says it's a positive climate change action and it should increase the range of wildlife and improve the visitor experience.
And the intention is that we would then have information boards so that people could have a look and say, there are this type of newt or that type of butterfly or this grasshopper, whatever it happens to be. So that should be an area that will look not very much different, but we might be able to enhance it with the addition of plants like red campion and cowslips and other plants that would naturally find their home there.
Bluebells and snowdrops are proposed for planting here.
In its first instance, it's an informal nature reserve already anyway, and I'm in conversation with Dorset Wildlife Trust to look at what would be needed if we were to formalise that into a nature reserve.
But she's mindful that status might bring extra complications.
What we want to be careful of is that if we formally designate it, is that going to be of benefit both to the area and to the town? Because it might come with extra sort of complications and ties and responsibilities that outweigh the benefits it brings.
The Town Council will ultimately decide whether there's support for designating this land as a special area of conservation or a site of nature conservation interest. John Park is also worried that could add too many restrictions.
It just increases another level of bureaucracy, because we've already got the bureaucracy of the conservation area and the fact we can't chop a tree down until we've got somebody else to agree it, or even prune a tree. So I think we need to know the implications of listing something as a nature conservation area before that decision is made. And there is a question, why do we want to do that? Because it will restrict the future management and decisions the Town Council might make in the future.
People might just hear the term nature reserve and think it's a protection, but you think it's potentially a hindrance.
It can be a hindrance to proper management in the future.
Whatever happens to this part of the slopes, they can't be left entirely to nature. Work is required to prevent trees from blocking the view or invasive species like Japanese knotweed and bracken from taking over. But John says the community needs to define what it means by the term nature or natural.
Natural can be the brambles and nettles, which are dominating at the moment, and scrub. And if it's left completely, it will gradually develop into woodland. 70 years ago, that whole bank was grazed and it was south-facing grassland. And even 20 years ago, there was still quite a lot of that grassland remaining, and there were very good displays of spring flowers and things like that, and it was much more attractive looking than it is now. It was a different sort of nature conservation. And if we want it to be natural, which I think we all do, but we have to decide what sort of natural do we want. Do we want grassland? Do we want woodland? Do we want something in between? Things like that.
So you'd prefer the grassland with the spring flowers coming out there?
I think many people will find that attractive, and I think they'll find it looks more attractive during the whole year, because particularly as it is now, particularly through the winter months, it looks very drab and unkept.
Managing the trees will also be critical so the scenery can be enjoyed.
We've done quite a lot of work on that in the past, and having to take down quite big trees that were beginning to obscure the view. So keeping that view open is very important, and particularly where people can sit on the seats on the zigzag steps, for instance, and can enjoy the view, but at the moment they can't. You've always got to remove a few trees because they're always going to grow in the wrong places. Once those, you will have to remove a few, but not very many.
So what we're planning to do is have some of the trees specifically identified as, if I say feature trees, ones that work really well to frame the view as you're stood at the top, because as much as being able to see beyond is important, actually framing that view is also very important. And maybe having some of the trees that grow tall planted lower down the slopes so that their height doesn't impede, and further up having shorter growing trees, or maybe just keeping them reduced.
So there could be some new planting of trees on that section of the slope?
Yeah, well, the first thing to do is to identify what we've got there already, maybe some of the saplings that are already coming up that have self-seeded, having a look and seeing what those are coming up, because the best thing that's going to be for this area is having trees that naturally find their home there, because they'll be the strongest.
John would like the policy relating specifically to Pine Walk to encourage replacement planting.
Pine Walk woodland is a moment dominated by very old trees. It's very attractive, it's lovely, but they're very old trees, and some of those trees, unfortunately, in the next 20 years or so, are going to fail. And the important thing, particularly if you're going to call it Pine Walk, is to actually try and get some more pine trees growing there, because there aren't many pine trees growing there. But there does need to be a replacement plan in progress there.
Trees will only be removed from Pine Walk if they're dangerous.
We are aware that there are occasions, especially when we get high winds, that some of the larger trees are causing movement. So it's a case of monitoring them. We've already got a really good arboriculturist looking after the monitoring of those trees to make sure that they are able to carry on being part of that feature.
These draft plans suggest that the southern slopes adjacent to Gold Hill remain inaccessible, with natural barriers like bramble, hawthorn and holly being encouraged.
There are health and safety issues. So at the moment it's very well overgrown with brambles and other foliage, and that's helpful to us because we don't want people to be able to walk right to the edge of the top of Gold Hill. There were thoughts about cutting a drop, if you like, before the wall to stop people from being able to get there and topple off the edge. But that would come with its own issues as well, because it would create a trough for rainwater to flow down to the bottom and could cause its own erosion. So we needed to rethink that plan. So at the moment, making the edge of Gold Hill Wall inaccessible at the top is our first priority for safety reasons.
Apple trees are sandwiched between the top of Gold Hill and St James's Park. Claire and John hope that brambles could be cleared from the area around established trees to allow community access.
Fairly well hidden at the moment, so they were planted approximately 6 or 7 years ago, and what this plan looks to do is make those more accessible so that people can go and pick an apple or a pear.
So there's a plan to make that a community orchard, in that you could go and pick what you wanted?
They would be publicly accessible, so if people were to pick them, that's great, but they're also there for the wildlife, so there would be benefit to the fruit growing there, whether it was humans eating them or other.
Both Claire and John understand it's important not to plant cider apple trees.
Got to remember that if we want to plant apples which are really attractive to eat, you've got to get the modern varieties rather than some of the old-fashioned cider varieties and things like that, which are really not very attractive to eat at all.
Brambles would be encouraged as protection around new trees. The proposal would set aside £52,000 for all of this project. That includes the council workers' time.
This is a significant amount of work that we're looking to do.
Around £25,000 of that sum will fund new play equipment in the two areas of St James's Park.
There's two zones down there. At the moment we've got a wooden play trail, if you like. It needs redoing and we would look at revamping that with other wooden equipment. But the other area we've got some metal play equipment and it's very, very good quality still, so we would look at relocating that and then putting back in something more natural but still aimed at the younger children.
Claire hopes that youngsters will be playing on the new equipment within the next 6 months.
So I say this with a little bit of hesitation. I would love to see this go in before the summer holidays.
Councillors will decide whether to adopt, reject or amend the proposed plan within weeks. Claire says key stakeholders and experts have shared their ideas and have helped formulate the plan.
We've worked with Open Spaces and the Tree Group, with Dorset Rangers and with Bridget Strawbridge to look at the biodiversity and the bee-friendliness of it. So yes, we've already spoken with quite a few key people to make sure that we've got the right breadth of issues addressed.
John says he's supportive, but thinks that the wider community also should be consulted.
The Open Spaces group are people who are very concerned about these things. We don't necessarily represent the whole of the population's views on this. And if there's going to be real consultation on it, people have got to be able to see what the options really are, perhaps by a series of photographs and saying, is it this you want or is it that you want or something like that.
And when a plan is adopted, in whatever form, John believes it's important it can be updated and can react to changing tastes and opinions.
I hope that it's not going to be a set-in-stone document. It's going to be a growing document and the consultations can go on and on and on in the future. And even in 5 years' time, you might want to look again and say, no, we don't really like what's doing now, let's change it. I think you must leave that option open.
Listen to Alfred.